The Mario Party series is at a critical point in its history right now. Ever since 2018, Nintendo has been desperate to return these games to their former glory, and all things considered, I'd say they were pretty successful. But now that we've seen a return to form, it's time to innovate, and the re-release of Mario Party Jamboree on Switch 2 is just the opportunity we need to see it happen. In this video, I'm gonna design my very own Mario Party game, from the roster, to the boards, to the mini-games, all in an attempt to show where I think the series should go next. The only stipulation here is that I have to keep these ideas within the realm of possibility, so you won't see a board inspired by Green Hill Zone or Link as a new playable character. But other than that, there are no rules. So without further ado, here's my pitch for the next Mario Party. In all of these Let's Make a Game videos, I like to start by coming up with an overarching theme or concept for the project. However, at the risk of being controversial, recent Mario Party games haven't really had it. Super was for all intents and purposes a reboot of the series, so it gets a pass for being a bit bland. But the main selling points of Superstars and Jamboree are just that they're more Mario Party. I guess you can make the argument that Superstars has an identity by virtue of it being a compilation game, but it doesn't really make that a part of its core identity in the way a game like the Top 100 did. But when you look back on these older games, they are bursting with personality. The theme of Mario Party 5 is dreams, Mario Party 2 is based around this theatrical theme park idea, and Mario Party 7 takes place on a cruise. But Mario Party 10 onwards are just boring by comparison, so that was at the top of my list for things to remedy. But I don't want to go too off the beaten path here. While the infamous Mario mandates have seemingly been rolled back to an extent, I still don't think Nintendo is bringing back Twyla or Tumble anytime soon. So I needed to come up with something that makes this game stand out while also staying confined to modern Mario's brand-safe constraints. And with all that in mind, the angle that I finally settled on is honestly probably the most obvious one. For years, I'm sure you've heard fans, critics, and YouTubers alike describe Mario Party as the friendship-ending game. But as far as I can tell, Nintendo's never really leaned into that for its marketing, and I think that's a big mistake. Of course, you don't want to directly advertise your game as being frustrating, but they could go for an approach similar to the Settle It and Smash campaign, where the ads could show all the different ways you could pull one over on your friends. And by extension, the game would be designed with the core idea of adding more moments that turn players against each other. Look, maybe I'm just a psychopath, but my favorite part of Mario Party is the rivalries it starts between friends. The satisfaction of getting your revenge or the hilarity of being targeted when you're already in last place is what makes the game so nail-biting. And that's the aspect that I want to take to its extreme in this new game that I'm calling Mario Party Bash. Do you get it? Like bash is in party, but also bash is in conflict. I thought it was clever. The logo and box art are very much in the style of Super and Jamboree. I decided on an orange gradient for this logo to make things look a little bit more intense, and the lighter orange on the box art is just to help it stand out a bit more. And since I don't have any official renders to work with, I put together some more overlooked ones from Mario's past. And the mishmash of different poses and outfits this allows for helps the design to look even more chaotic, visually demonstrating what Mario Party is all about. And while it definitely doesn't look official, I was still pretty proud of what I was able to put together. But with all that said, it's time to load up our theoretical game and check out all the new content. Starting with Mario Party rosters are weird. You'd probably expect that they'd just gradually increase in size over time, but it's actually wildly inconsistent. For example, Mario Party 3 has the exact same roster size as Mario Party 12, but in between those games, you'll see roster sizes as high as 14 and as low as 4. And we've even seen some pretty drastic changes here in the Switch era, as Superstars literally cut Super Mario Party's roster in half. But I digress. All of this is to say that the playable characters in these games don't seem like much of a priority for Nintendo, and I think that's a real shame. In other games with a ton of playable characters, people get really serious about their favorites. For example, I main Banjo in Smash and Donkey Kong in Mario Kart, and with that knowledge alone, I'm sure you just made your fair share of judgments about me. But at least I don't main Steve. A player's character of choice can really make or break the experience as a whole. I'll give you an example. Despite having all 3 Switch games, my friends and I only ever play Super or Jamboree, because Superstars doesn't have Dry Bones, Bowser Jr., or Monty Mole. all 3 of their mains. But hey, at least we got Birdo, right? The roster is the very first thing you have to get right. So entering into the Switch 2 era, I want to add 11 new spots to Jamboree's total, bringing us to 33 characters. Now you might say this is unrealistic, but I'll raise you the last Mario spin-off, which has 38 characters. Plus, 33 gives us enough space for all the staples, as well as a few oddballs too. Nintendo's really been pushing these side characters a lot lately, so it feels only natural to bring them into Mario Party as well. Anyway, here's what I came up with. The first thing you'll probably notice is that there are 8 unlockable characters down at the bottom, and we'll come back to them later. But first, I want to show off the improvements I've made to the base roster. First of all, Jamboree's organization was all over the place, so I fixed that by lumping the characters into sections. The main Mario cast takes up the top row, with the brothers, princesses, and toads all next to one another. These are all characters you've seen before, but with one subtle addition. I didn't want to go all out with different skins for each character like Mario Kart World did, but I did want to add a bit more variety. So I decided to take the Mario Kart 8 route and add a sub-menu where you can choose between different colors for Yoshi and Toad. I'm not gonna lie, you guys, this is purely because I want to play as Yellow Yoshi. Like, honestly, we could just scrap Green Yoshi and replace him with Yellow Yoshi and I'd be fine, but I felt like this was a more realistic way to include him. Then there's the middle row, which is dedicated to Bowser's Army and the villains. There are a couple of new additions here, namely Chain Chomp and Kamek, who aren't the most exciting choices admittedly, but feel like they belong in the cast for sure. Kamek has a deep history with the Mario Party series, so I thought we'd let him actually participate for the first time since 9 and have a normal Magic Koopa take his place as the board host. And as for Chain Chomp, after seeing the way he ran around in Mario Tennis Fever, I just couldn't get how hilarious it would be to see him do that across the Mario Party board out of my head. So I decided to add him in. There are only 2 cut characters in this row, those being Spike and Boo. Boo has been replaced by King Boo for some added style, as well as the Luigi's Mansion representation, and Spike was personal, I can't lie. He just never stood out to me or anyone I've ever played with as a solid pick. In fact, I've probably played as every character in Jamboree except for Spike. I haven't seen a fandom for him online the way that other side characters like Ninja and Monty have cultivated either. And so I really don't think he'll be missed. If I'm wrong though, please let me know in the comments. You know, it's Spike Nation, if you exist, rise up. Oh, and I forgot to include this in my script, but similarly to Toad and Yoshi swapping the, skins there, you can do the same thing for Koopa and Drybones. I think I have to add that in or else my friend June might kill me. He's the biggest Drybones fan I've ever met. And that brings us to our final row, featuring the DK crew. And I can see the comments already. I know it wouldn't be a Kopie video if I didn't add a bunch of Kongs, but I think these picks are more justified than they might seem. First of all, Diddy was playable in both Star Rush and Super, and he's one of the most popular Mario characters in the series, so I think that his return would be pretty well welcomed. K. Rool, on the other hand, is where I might have lost you. But the fact is, there aren't that many outright villain characters in Mario Party, which makes a lot of the rosters feel pretty hollow. So I think this would be a solid way to remedy that. Not to mention, the DK brand is getting a massive push right now, so 3 characters from his side of the franchise isn't unreasonable. But what if I told you that I wasn't done? These unlockable characters were chosen almost entirely for their designs. Watching people play Mario Kart World over the last year and fall in love with nobodies like Conkdor and Parabiddybud has really opened my eyes. I've learned that it's not a character's personality or history with the Mario series that gets them chosen in these more casual-oriented spin-offs, it's just how cool and or silly they can look. So picking characters who stand out visually and appeal to different demographics of people was at the top of my priority list. And for my first pick, the demographic that I wanted to represent the most was uncles, I guess. Funky Kong is a fan favorite character by all accounts. Even all these years later, he's still the only character I ever see people playing as in Mario Kart Wii. I've noticed that he especially appeals to older men, and in a party game where ideally everyone will find their perfect main, that's a wide net to cast. Also, I think he serves as a pretty exciting first unlockable, incentivizing the player to progress in a way that I don't think Ninja or Pauline ever did. Next up, we have Nabbit, and on top of him being a very unique design, he's also been a main member of the Mario cast since 2013. When I showed this list to some of my friends, they didn't even realize that Nabbit was a new character, which just goes to show how much of a no-brainer inclusion he is. So if I had to put my money on any newcomer in the next Mario Party game, this would be it. In terms of the group I think he would appeal to the most, this character reminds me a lot of my nephew and cousin who are 6 and 7 years old. This mysterious and mischievous character seems to have a younger charm to him that makes a lot of sense when you consider he was literally designed to be an entry-level character for kids who are getting into Mario for the first time. And that kind of appeal is exactly what our character roster needs right now. Basically, every Mario Party game has a niche side character with a cool look that gets added in for no particular reason. We've had Ninja, Pom-Pom, and Spike before, but for this game, I went with Glydon. I wanted to get some Mario Odyssey representation here since it really doesn't have much of a place in the spin-offs when compared to other games like Galaxy or Wonder. But I opted not to choose Kopie on account of design variety being at the core of these choices. Not to say Kopie isn't well designed, but we really don't need a secondary ghost character. So I went with Glydon, who in my opinion has the most memorable look of any of Odyssey's NPCs. I could also see this character really appealing to dorky guys with glasses like me. I don't know if this will make sense to anyone else, but I think Glydon is to men what Monty Mole is to women. This is a character that needs no introduction. Like I said earlier, another goal of this roster is to include more characters that are outright villains and not just species in the Mario universe. And Petey Piranha is exactly that. Every single time this guy is included in spin-offs, I see a lot of excitement for him. Again, I think the bright colors and overall goofy look will interest younger players, but I could also see a lot of older fans, particularly millennials or Gen Z who grew up on the GameCube, choosing to play as him for nostalgic reasons. I remember him being playable in a lot of Wii and DS era games too, so I think it's about time he makes his return to the spin-off cast. And now, it's time for a controversial one. I can already hear the influx of comments saying, "Oh, I thought you said this was gonna be realistic." But honestly, I think Captain Syrup's chances are much better than you might think. Nintendo has a major problem when it comes to female reps in the Mario series, and they know it. It's hardly a big deal in the mainline games, but for these spin-offs, they make up so little of the cast that options for people who want to play as girls are pretty limited. Hence my observation earlier about how a lot of female players are drawn to Monty Mole. Consequently, it was important to me to add more female representation. Being the DK fan I am, my mind immediately went to Dixie, but again, she lacks design variety compared to the 3 other monkeys I already added. But then it hit me. Captain Syrup from the Wario series absolutely has the potential to be the next Pauline. Before Odyssey, Pauline was a very niche Mario character, having been effectively replaced by Peach for years and then relegated to a mildly successful Donkey Kong spin-off series. But nonetheless, as soon as Odyssey put a spotlight back on her, she was thrown into everything. And in my opinion, that's not because of her list of in-game appearances, as that's still pretty limited. No, it's actually because Nintendo desperately needed more variety than just 3 princesses. So now take a look at Captain Syrup. She's arguably closer to the mainline Mario series than Pauline ever was, given the fact that she debuted in Mario Land 3. Additionally, she's appeared as the main antagonist in 2 games, as well as a pretty big character in Wario Land Shake It. And that's all not even mentioning the crazy amount of rumors about a new Wario Land game being developed as we speak. I wholeheartedly believe that if characters like Pauline with only 1 mainline appearance as an NPC, or Diddy Kong who has literally never appeared in a mainline Mario game can get in, then surely Captain Syrup isn't that outlandish. Pauline shows us that Nintendo clearly wants more variety beyond just the 3 princesses, and a selfish pirate captain is about as far away from Princess Peach as you can get. And if you still think that I'm crazy and this is completely unrealistic, just know I'm willing to die on this hill, and we will be fighting in the comment section. Now, these last 3 certainly won't be as divisive as the last one, because none of them are strangers to Mario spin-off games, although they are newcomers to Mario Party. And you can probably guess why they're all lumped in together, as they each represent one of the 3 original 3D Mario games. King Bob-omb representing 64, Pianta for Sunshine, and Luma for Galaxy. These 3 all have similar stories to Chain Chomp in that I saw them in various other games, and they all just seem to fit. Not to mention, their dramatically different appearances and body types would be attractive to all different kinds of people. King Bob-omb specifically is one of my favorites to play as in the limited appearances he's had. He was my main in both Mario Golf Super Rush and Mario Kart Tour, God rest its soul, and that's mainly due to my love for 64 and heavyweight characters as a whole. But all three of these guys have history in the Mario Party series, so upgrading them to full characters in the same way we did for Kamek only feels natural. And that leaves us with this, a 33 character roster with 14 new additions. And to be honest, I think this is the best character roster I've ever made. There are no glaring omissions, a nice balance of villains and heroes, and solid representation for every Mario subseries. Even with the more out there picks, this all still feels pretty uniform and like we could actually see it one day. But that's enough of me patting myself on the back, because it's finally time to get into the real discussion. This is the part I love the most about Jamboree. The game's 7 boards all feel so substantial, where Supers 4 and Superstars 5 are just unacceptably low. I also liked how they brought back a couple of old boards on top of 5 brand new ones. And because I like that so much, we're gonna take that framework and scale it up. Mario Party 1 still maintains the most amount of boards in the series with a total of 8, and I think it's about time we dethrone it. So for Mario Party Bash, we're gonna increase that number to 10 boards. But to keep things realistic, 5 of those will be remastered ones from past games that fit in with our overall vision, while 5 others will be brand new. Anyway, to cover all 10 while keeping things fresh, I'll be alternating between new and old concepts to demonstrate how well they work together. Starting with an original idea, the Toadstool Cafe. A common criticism I've seen of almost every new Mario Party game is that the economy is completely broken. Oftentimes, games will reach a point where coins become almost trivial as players pile up a ton of them and don't have to worry much about losses as they're simply too rich to fail. So to fix that, I had to come up with a way to keep money moving constantly on this map, and I think I managed to figure it out. Here is my completed design. Now I know it looks a little phallic, but please just try to ignore that, because the intention for this was to actually be shaped like Chef Toad's head. Hopefully you can see the resemblance there. Chef Toad and the Toadstool Cafe got their start in the Universal theme park, which this board is based on. But ever since then, they've also been seen in the Mario Galaxy movie, meaning that the games are weirdly the only place this character hasn't shown up yet. So to remedy that, he'll be our first board's host and mascot. The big gimmick this time around is that the star doesn't move, and you don't earn it by paying with coins. Instead, the game begins by showing you one of 10 recipes for baked goods. Each recipe consists of 3 ingredients, which can be found at shops located all around the map. This way, players are constantly making purchases with their coins, and their placing in minigames is even more crucial. Because if you don't have enough coins and you miss an ingredient from one of the shops, it'll really set you back. Once a player collects all of the needed ingredients, they must make their way back to the start and deposit them into the red pipe. The pipe will then spit out their creation topped with a star, and a brand new recipe will be given to the players. And the map is designed with this adaptability in mind. There are a ton of branching paths and shortcuts, so players can strategize quickly to reach the ingredients they need. And each shop sells something different. Ingredients that show up in less recipes are all grouped together in Wiggler's Fruit Cart and Chef Guy's Sweet Shop. However, the other NPCs sell only one common ingredient, like eggs, milk, and flour. This board is pretty basic overall, but that's by design. Every Mario Party needs an introductory board to give you an idea of what the game is going to be like. And knowing that, I'm sure you're wondering how this all ties into the Bash concept I mentioned earlier. Well, there are 2 ways this board lets you mess with your opponents. The first is Chef Boo. He behaves similarly to a regular Boo, but instead of stealing your stars, he'll steal an ingredient of your choice from one of your opponents. Maybe you could get his help if you're missing just one ingredient, or you could use him to stop someone else from getting a star. The other shakeup comes in the form of Cookatiel, who sits in her nest near the top of the board. If you pay her 25 coins, she'll swap the recipe to a different one before someone manages to bake it. So if you're missing an ingredient and don't want to make the trek back, you can always change the course of the game by paying off Cookatiel. Again, coins are king on this map, and the winner will almost always be the player who spends their money wisely. Other than that, the rest of the board is about what you'd expect. We've got lucky spaces, item spaces, Bowser spaces, a regular item shop, and chance time spaces, all culminating in a solid entry-level board that plays completely differently to almost every other board in the game. And you'll soon come to find out that that's a bit of a trend. I made very few of these boards more traditional Mario Party experiences because they've all got to have that extra bash flavoring. Which brings me to our very first returning board. Mario Party 3 is probably my favorite out of the N64 trilogy, which is shockingly a bit of a hot take. I see a lot of fans rank it in last place on account of its boards of all things, which is crazy to me because Chilly Waters is right there, guys. This board is just begging to be remade. Despite being completely still, the penguins and snowmen playing around everywhere make this place feel so alive. I also really like the juxtaposition of this cheery Christmas-themed board including a haunted forest. The Christmas lights strewn across barren trees and the only part of the board where there aren't a bunch of friendly faces around you, in tandem with this collapsed snowman, just feels so eerie. It's really cool as a little sub-area. But of course, fun aesthetics are not the reason why I chose this for Mario Party Bash. No, the reason why I believe this fits our concept so well is right here in the middle. The centerpiece of this board is a thinly frozen over lake that connects each part of the map together. It serves as a great way to race to the star no matter where you're starting from. But the catch is, if two players step on the ice at the same time, they both get sent back to the start. This alone creates so many opportunities to screw over your friends, as well as constantly strategize. If you want to make a quick break for the star, you have to analyze where everyone else is on the map, and then consider if they're in a position where it would be advantageous of them to risk getting transported back to the beginning if it means they can bring you down with them. This one mechanic just adds so much depth to the experience, and I think placing it in a game with a special emphasis on taking down your opponents in underhanded ways will help to shine a light on what makes this board so great for a lot of fans that previously overlooked it. In fact, it's such a good design that I even adapted a few elements from it into my next original board. Welcome to DK Isle, my spin on the classic Donkey Kong board theme we've seen in plenty of Mario parties before. Now I know what you're thinking. That's a lot of spaces. Toadstool Cafe had 75, Chilly Waters had 97, and now DK Isle has the most in series history by a lot with 146 total spaces. Now I know that seems like a lot, but it's all by design, because the entire gimmick of this board is risk and reward. Due to its size, every turn matters, as you'll naturally want to cross as quickly as possible while preventing your opponents from doing the same. The first method I thought of for this is a classic DK mine. These two cave entrances on either side of the map essentially act as fast travel locations. Should you choose to enter the mine, you can ride the mine cart from one corner of the board to the other in as few as 10 spaces. But here's the catch. The minecart rail looks like this. Every single space is bad news, with most being red spaces and every third being a Bowser space. So should the star spawn on the other side of the map, you always have a reliable way to get there, but you might just go bankrupt on your way. However, I will acknowledge that if you get a triple dice block or something like that, you can make quick work of the mine. And I really don't want this feature to be abused, so I had to come up with a solution. I went ahead and placed happening spaces all across the map. If these are landed on by any player while you're in the mine, the track will explode and blast you over to an emergency secondary track, which adds an additional 17 dangerous spaces for you to traverse in order to reach the end. Meaning that this mine actually includes anywhere from 10 to 27 pure bad luck spaces. This makes it to where players can intentionally mess with each other like every other bash mechanic, but the mine is still always the fastest route. But we're not in the beginner boards anymore, so this isn't the only way you can mess with your opponents. I also came up with a mechanic surrounding rope bridges. The first rope bridge you'll encounter is up by DK Mountain. Every time you choose to cross one of these, you're prompted to either cut it down or leave it standing. If you choose to cut the bridge, it'll take 3 turns to be put back up, and it will send anyone who may have been on the bridge at the time of cutting back to the start of the map. In the case of DK Mountain, a star will spawn there on occasion, and if you're the first to cross the bridge and choose to cut it, you'll basically guarantee that you get the star. However, you're also effectively trapping yourself to run in circles until the bridge is repaired, meaning that your opponents will likely get a head start on the next star location. Other than that, the rest of the board is pretty standard. The overall design rewards players for taking the long route while making things harder for those who take shortcuts, thereby making it extra risky to go for the star as quickly as possible. This is the first more traditional board I designed, but like I mentioned earlier, I want each of these to have something that really makes them unique, something that, makes them stand out, which is what led to my next retro pick. Koopa's Tycoon Town is probably the single most popular board in Mario Party history, and for good reason. The concept here is sort of like Monopoly in that players are all competing to invest in different properties around the board in exchange for stars. And as all diehard fans of the channel would know, I'm a massive Monopoly fan. Please someone go watch my Monopoly video. But anyway, this board is absolutely perfect for Bash because it puts players in a bidding war with one another constantly, as the person who invests the most coins into any hotel becomes the owner, and each hotel is worth up to 3 stars depending on the amount that's been invested. This mechanic goes really deep too. I don't have time to get into all of the little intricacies, but the YouTube channel Designing For has a really great deep dive on it that I'll link in the iCard, whichever side that's on, so you can check that out. I really recommend his stuff. But since this board came to us from Mario Party 8, we have to adapt some elements to fit modern Mario Party. First and foremost, the Bowser and DK spaces. These are integral to the design of Tycoon Town, so we can't just leave them behind. Thankfully, Jamboree made the answer for what to do about Bowser spaces pretty clear with its Imposter Bowser idea. For those unaware, this is just a regular enemy transformed by Kamek to look and act like Bowser without actually being Bowser since he's playable. As for the DK spaces though, I recommend we just replace him with Dixie Kong. I already had her in a supporting role being the shopkeeper on DK Isle, so I think this would be a fun way to utilize her beyond just that. I'm also largely in favor of giving the DK crew bigger roles in Mario spin-off games due to my obvious personal bias. For this next one, I wanted to tackle what seems to be one of the more divisive board types in the Mario Party series, linear boards. These are maps that are effectively just a straight line or only have one single route. Sometimes they can be seen as masterpieces like Pagoda Peak or Mario's Rainbow Castle, while other times they can really split fans right down the middle like Shy Guy's Perplex Express. The most common complaints I see against these boards are their lack of player interaction and agency, so those are the top 2 things I wanted to fix with my design. Speaking of which, here it is. Guys, I promise you I didn't run out of ideas, please just hear me out. I know this map looks incredibly boring. It's just a thin oval with a static star spawn, effectively working like a merry-go-round where each player has ample opportunity to collect as many stars as they want. But that simple design is exactly what allows for it to become so chaotic once we start mixing in all of these new elements. The theme is Bowser Jr.'s Playroom. A Magikoopa has shrunk all of the players down to the size of dolls on Junior's floor. The star is always up here at the top right corner inside of the toy chest, making them readily available for players on this side of the map. However, if you're on the other side, it becomes a race to get back to the top right before your opponents. And therein lies the twist. This board is filled with ways for players to switch lanes themselves or force their opponents to. The most obvious way to do this is through these happening spaces. Simply land on one and a variety of toy-themed effects could take place, for better or worse. But I hear you, there's hardly any happening spaces on the map, so how often is this realistically going to happen? Well, I'm glad you asked, because this version of the board is only how it looks at the beginning of the game. See, every time a player takes a star out of the toy chest, Bowser Jr. throws a little tantrum, and as a result, he tosses a lot more toys out of the toy chest, adding even more happening spaces to the board. And as a cute little detail, I thought it would be cool if like every single turn the environment around you gets extra cluttered. So you start with this very nice, clean floor, it looks like Kamek is just swept and everything, and then by the end there are toys everywhere. Junior will do this for every star until 65% of the board is covered in happening spaces, meaning that something exciting is bound to happen with almost every roll. But while this does keep the map from getting boring, it doesn't exactly solve that player agency problem I mentioned in the beginning. I mean, all of this is pure RNG. So to add a bit more player input to each map, I created a board exclusive item called the Magnet. The magnet can be placed down anywhere, and the next person who crosses the adjacent space on the other lane will be attracted to it. So you could theoretically use this to bring yourself back over to the space right in front of the star, but if someone gets there before you, you've basically just played yourself. On basically any other board, this idea would be completely broken, but given how unpredictable the happening spaces are, it's really never a guarantee that things will go to plan whenever you use the magnet. Listen, I know us fans are pretty fatigued from the constant remakes of N64 boards, but Luigi's Engine Room is something special. You can pretty well guess the gimmick just by looking at it. As you can see, there are these red and blue gates which alternate raising and lowering between turns. However, players can also influence this by paying off NPCs to raise and lower the gates or by landing on happening spaces. And this gimmick sounds like it came straight from one of my custom boards. It's perfect for Bash. It's the perfect blend of strategy and randomness that the Mario Party series thrives on. Though, like most of the boards on this list, it's a bit divisive, and that's primarily due to some of the star placements. Take this one for example. As pointed out by Auravales on Reddit, it requires you to pass through 3 blue gates in a single turn or have somebody else land on a happening space, because they're definitely not going to pay to switch it for you. And that's an excellent criticism, so we're going to take this star and move it back a little bit. However, I think some of the other more frustrating placements add a nice bit of challenge to the board, so we'll go ahead and keep those intact. Adding in this map also inspired me to play around with happening spaces a little bit more on my next board too. Super Mario Wonder has been getting a lot of love in the spin-off games lately, and it's completely deserved. I know there are some fans out there that have sort of switched up on the game itself in recent years, but I think the creativity that was put on display in every single level is something that all us Mario fans can really appreciate. So I wanted to take this trend to the extreme by creating a Flower Kingdom board. Visually, I thought it would be fun to have each little section of the board split up into different themes from the game's worlds to fully encapsulate its fantastic art direction. But the main idea for the map as a whole was finding different ways to implement wonder effects into Mario Party. The primary way I accomplished this was by the implementation of 12 happening spaces that feature a wide range of different references to the game. You can see all 6 possible wonder effects I designed explained on screen now, each of them taking up 2 different spaces on the board. And because this is Bash, I added in another board exclusive item called the Wonder Flower. There are different types of Wonder Flowers that can appear in shops, all of which have effects that match the happening spaces. However, the benefit of using these instead of just triggering a happening space for free is the ability to utilize them against your opponents. Shops will also sell skeleton keys, which unlock this little shortcut with Boo, and 1 randomized standard item such as a mushroom. For this board, I wanted to make something that was a little bit more lax because these next couple that we're going to discuss get really intense. When I was a kid, the very first Mario Party game I ever got my hands on was this one, Mario Party 10, and I absolutely hated it. So I didn't really get into the series until Super came out in 2018 because my first experience was just so bad. So you can believe me when I say that I also hate the car mechanic like many other fans. However, I don't think it's completely without merit. So when drafting ideas for this video, I thought it might be fun to make one car map as a way to add variety to the overall experience. All I had to do was fix the problems so many of those old boards have and finally show to everyone that this idea isn't all bad. But in my research, I found that there was kind of already a perfect car board. So instead of making my own, I decided to include this one, Magma Mine from Mario Party 9. The main feature of this board is that you're being chased by lava. At each turn, the game indicates where the lava will rise to, and if it catches up to the car, the player in front will lose half of their mini-stars. This map is perfect for Bash since there are so many ways you can trap your friends into having to deal with the lava. And those elements of strategy and tension keep this board from making the same mistakes as other ones in 9 and 10. You're not just sitting around and watching a number go up, you're instead constantly strategizing and trying to predict what everyone else is going to do next. I also love this edition because it's such a shakeup from everything else. You can go from Toadstool Cafe to Junior's Playroom to this and have almost entirely different gaming experiences each time, thereby adding even more replay value than games like Super or Jamboree have. I am anticipating some pushback from the comments here, but I don't think many fans would realistically be upset so long as 90% of the boards are classic Mario Party, while this one is different. In fact, I'd honestly expect people to be more excited than anything, especially since there's an entire generation out there that grew up on 9 and 10. Well, 9. I'm pretty sure I'm the only person who bought 10. Here it is, the final original board, and similarly to the last pick, it's a little personal. I decided to go with a pirate theme on this one since we have both Captain Syrup and K. Rool joining the roster, but I chose to specifically theme it around Captain Syrup since we've already got a DK board. The inspiration behind this one is simple. Like I mentioned earlier, Super was the first Mario Party game that I really fell in love with. And to this day, its board designs are being trashed all over the internet. Now, I'm not gonna sit here and lie to you guys that Mega Fruit Paradise is secretly some sort of hidden gem because it's absolutely not. But still, I personally, subjectively think that they're not all that bad. So coming from a place of love, I wanted to use Mega Fruit's 4-island structure as a framework to create a new map that fixes its many issues. And my final result was this, Captain Syrup's Shipyard. Since this is an overhead view, it might be a little hard to tell, but this junction here in the middle does not connect all 4 islands. The circle and star islands are connected by a bridge, and the square and hexagon islands are connected by a bridge, meaning that the only way to travel between disconnected islands is at these ship ports run by Syrup's crew. If you pay them, they'll take you to the previously inaccessible island. And unlike Mega Fruit, you don't have to land on the spaces in front of these ships to utilize them. You'll be given the opportunity just for passing them. But keep in mind that if you do choose to board, it'll cancel the rest of your roll and end your turn. Both ships sail south of where they're stationed to these drop-off points. Now on the surface, I'm sure this seems like a needlessly convoluted way to connect these islands, but as I'm sure you've come to expect by now, there's a twist. Pirates have no allegiances, and therefore, if another player happens to be in the area and bribes the crew before you leave, they'll just dump you off on a completely different island, effectively wasting your money. But that's not the only unique gimmick, because stars on this map come to us in the form of buried treasure, meaning that no one knows exactly where they are. However, at the start of each turn, a pirate goon will give you a hint off of his map as to where the treasure might be. So you've got to make sure that you're paying very close attention and don't miss that turn's clue. And with that, we've gone through all of my original designs. But a good Mario Party game wouldn't be complete without one last unlockable Bowser level. Bowser's warped orbit from Mario Party 8 fittingly feels like the final boss of our bash idea. The gimmick is genius. Instead of buying stars like you normally would, each player actually starts out with 5 stars already. And it's your job to keep your stars safe while stealing them from everybody else. You can do this with a combination of 2 board exclusive items, the Bowser Candy and the Bullet Candy. The former allows for players to roll 2 dice blocks and steal 2 stars from anybody that they pass, while the Bullet Candy lets you roll 3 dice blocks but only steal 1 star from each opponent you pass. And again, since this is a Mario Party 8 board, Dixie Kong is going to be filling in for DK, and she will award the player a star for landing on her space, adding 1 more star into circulation every time she's triggered, and that's everything. Here's one more look over our board selection, and honestly, I couldn't be happier with it. I love the variety of gameplay styles and themes that each one offers, and seeing them all together like this just makes it feel so much more official. But I will acknowledge that that was a lot to get through, so let's take a brief detour into one of the most crucial yet often overlooked elements of Mario Party: the items. To start us off, we have 21 returning items, as you can see on screen now. These were all chosen on account of them either being Mario Party staples like the mushrooms, or just fitting in with our bash concept with their potential for player conflict like the Wacky Watch. But where this discussion gets really interesting is in the custom items I designed, all of which are inspired by newer or underrepresented Mario games. Let's go through them all rapid fire. First of all, we have the Bubble Flower. This item surrounds your character in a protective bubble, making you temporarily invincible from all negative effects. For example, if you're playing on Bowser's warped orbit and someone passes you to steal a star, your bubble will just pop instead, and your stars will remain untouched. The same applies for if Boo is called on you, or if a player uses an offensive item against you. It's got a lot of utility, and consequently comes at a pretty high price. Next up is the Boomerang Flower, another defensive item. However, this one is only good for defending against other items. It doesn't protect you from Boo or board events like the Bubble Flower does. To put it simply, if you have a Boomerang Flower in your inventory and another player attempts to use an offensive power-up against you, it will reflect the attack back on them. And you'll come to find out how beneficial this can be the further we get into this list. The Bob-omb is our first attacking item and is also the simplest. Dropping it on a player of your choice sends them back 5 spaces, so it can really come in handy if someone is beating you in a race to the next star. The blue shell works just like it does in Mario Kart, targeting the player in first place. If it lands on you, it'll cause you to lose coins 70% of the time, an item 20% of the time, or a star 10% of the time. Notably, the player who uses the shell does not get the items that are dropped. They're just gone for the rest of the game. And this item is also pretty rare, just like anything else that could potentially take a star. The Ice Flower is another offensive item, but it's a bit of a double-edged sword. It freezes a player of your choice in an ice block for a single turn, but it also makes them invulnerable for the time they're frozen. meaning that you could unintentionally help the person you freeze in some scenarios. Second to last, we have our final defensive item, the Vanish Cap from Mario 64. Put simply, this prevents you from being targeted by other players for one single turn. And finally, we have Kopie. I'm gonna be honest, this is the most busted item I made, but I just had to include it because of how much of a fun idea it is. Kopie allows you to take control of another player for one turn. You can waste one of their items, set them off course to the star, anything you want. But to balance this out a little bit, you're only allowed to take one action. So if you really have an item you're worried about, make them waste it or use it on another player. Or maybe if they're getting too close to the star, you could make them walk away from it. But you can't stack these, and like the blue shell, this is a very rare item. And there you have it, 7 Bash exclusive items designed specifically to prioritize combat, on top of 21 returning items and a bunch of board exclusive items. That's pretty much in line with Jamboree's selection, so I'd say we did pretty good. But now it's finally time for the moment you've all been waiting for, the heart and soul of Mario Party, the minigames. In my opinion, every Mario Party needs at least 100 minigames. It's just the right amount to make everything feel varied while also not being overly bloated. Jamboree has a record high number of minigames with 112, so you may think that we don't need to make any changes here. But you would be very wrong. See, Jamboree actually locks a huge portion of those games behind its other modes, which isn't inherently a bad thing until you realize that the game advertised to have the most minigames in the series actually has a pretty standard amount when it comes to normal play. It's even more frustrating when you take into account how easily some of these mode-exclusive minigames could have been translated to the main board mode. To fix this, Bash will feature 100 minigames available to play in the main game. That way, even though it's not a higher number than Jamboree, it still feels much bigger. But that said, this video would get real boring real fast if I just sat here and rattled off 100 minigame ideas. So instead, I'm going to take you through each of the 6 different types of minigames and explain how I bashify them. So let's take a look, starting with my personal favorite category. 3v1 minigames are often cited as some of the worst in the series due to their widespread balancing issues. However, when Nintendo gets these right, they really get them right. So for my 3v1 minigame, I wanted to make sure I was keeping things both balanced and original. And to accomplish that, I created something unlike anything else the Mario Party series has ever seen. A social deduction minigame called Whodunit. The game opens by alerting you that a shine sprite has been stolen from Delfino Mansion. Players must explore various rooms in the mansion to find evidence and catch the culprit before time runs out. There are 3 pieces of evidence located in 3 different rooms: the camera footage, the footprints, and a lost item. And now here's the twist. At the beginning of the game, one player will feel a vibration in their controller which indicates that they are the shine thief. Their job is to look like they're aiding in the investigation while they actively try to sabotage it. See, if the shine thief finds a piece of evidence before anyone else, they'll just fabricate it. So if the lost item was supposed to be Mario's hat, it would be shown to the other players as something like a Yoshi egg. Or if the camera footage was going to reveal that a short figure in red stole the shine, it would be changed to a small green figure or something like that. When all 3 pieces of evidence are found, they'll be presented to the players again for 30 seconds. At this time, everyone must debate on who they think the shine thief is and vote for that person. If they get it right, the 3 detectives win. If they get it wrong, the thief wins. This game was obviously inspired a lot by Clue, but I also took some ideas from other popular multiplayer games like Jackbox and Among Us. It's admittedly a bit more complicated than the rest of the minigames on this list, but I like the idea of having some games that make you use your head instead of just relying on luck or gaming skills. The next type I want to cover are the coin minigames, and I actually came up with 2 different ideas that I want to show you. The first idea I had came from my most recent playthrough of Mario 64. I was on the level where you unlock the wing cap and have to fly around to get all 8 of the red coins. And that got me thinking, how fun would it be if there was a Mario Party minigame that was like a wing cap obstacle course? And that thought is what led me to come up with Wings to the Sky. It's a competitive minigame where all 4 players must fly through 10 moving rings of coins. If you get through them, you get the coins, but if you missed one, you're out. And my other idea is called Treasure Avalanche. It's inspired by this mobile game that I vaguely remember as a kid. I think it might have been like a My Talking Tom thing. I don't know. It doesn't matter. Basically, there are these Lakitus at the top of the screen. Some of them throw down coins, and others throw down spinies. Players must stay under the coin clouds and avoid the spinies or they'll lose. You can also shove your opponents as a form of sabotage to fit the overall bash theme a little bit better. You win if you're the last man standing or if the time limit runs out. Moving on, we've already done 3v1 minigames, so why not tackle 2v2 next? This one is called Pipe Partners, and players are obviously split into teams of 2. It's one player's job to rotate the maze of green pipes to help the other player, who's controlling a bomb, reach the end before their timer runs out and the bomb explodes. The first team to reach the end of the maze wins, and if both teams fail, the winner is whoever was closer to the finish line. Rounding out our basic minigame types, we have the classic free-for-all style. I call this one cloud jumping. It's a vertical platformer where players must hop from cloud to cloud. They can also jump on each other's heads as a way to gain extra height and screw over the competition. If you fall off of a cloud or an opponent knocks you down, you lose, and the last man standing is the winner. Okay, now let's get back to the slightly more niche minigame styles with dual minigames. I can't lie, you guys, my idea for this one is ripped straight from 1-2 Switch, but I think it could be adapted into an excellent Mario Party minigame. Plus, it's not like the series is ever gonna come back after that. So really, it's only fair to let it live on in Nintendo's other party game series. Each player is equipped with an NES Zapper and an Old West style duel. They must wait for the talking flower to yell "fire" before they can pull the trigger. But being the obnoxious little guy he is, he'll occasionally yell different words that start with an F, like file or frisbee. If you jump the gun and pull the trigger for any of these fake out phrases, you'll lose, and likely say an F word of your own. But if you both fire on the correct command, the player who was the fastest will win the duel. The final type of minigames that we're going to cover here are boss minigames. Since we have so many villain characters on the roster already, I had to get a bit creative with who I picked to be the boss here. And after some thinking, I eventually landed on Wart. I figured he isn't as obscure of a choice given his popularity following his appearance in the Mario Galaxy movie and Link's Awakening. And once I picked a character, coming up with a boss fight around him was pretty easy. I call it Bubble Busters. Players are put into an arena with 4 cannons on the sides and a giant wart in the middle. Each cannon periodically shoots out turnips, which the players can grab and throw. Wart attacks by opening up his mouth and shooting bubbles at players who will be carried off screen if they're hit. However, it takes 3 seconds for a bubble to charge up, so while Wart has his mouth open, players can either dodge the attack or throw a turnip down his throat to damage him. They can also sabotage other players by throwing the turnips at them instead. The game ends when Wart has either taken 3 hits from the turnips or every player has been defeated by Wart. And those are my ideas for the minigames. I'm hoping that you're really starting to see this vision I have come together as I've incorporated PvP in literally every element of this game design so far. I think it's fair to say that we've officially made good on the title's promise. However, there's still more to do, so I ask that you indulge me a little bit for this last little victory lap of ideas. Every Mario Party should have some fun side modes, and ours is no different. However, these extra modes all had to be designed with the knowledge that they can't add minigames that wouldn't already be in the main board mode. So with that constraint, let's get into it. Online mode is a must and has been a series staple since Super Mario Party. I don't think I really need to explain how nice it is that you can still play the game you spent a ton of money on even when you don't have anybody to play it with close by. I'd also want to add a dedicated team mode where players can move independently of one another, but their scores are combined in the end. It would be a 2-on-2 mode, which I believe some Mario parties have done before, but there are always some weird caveats around there. This should just be an extension of the main board mode, with the only exception being the way the game is scored. But that's all the boring stuff out of the way, so let's talk about some of the fun ideas I had. First up is the Bash Arcade. This is an endurance mode where you must complete all 100 minigames in order without losing. Though, given how big of a challenge that is, this is more of a high score based thing, hence the name. I think a lot of these side modes should be single player focused to really shake up the formula. And this method of getting players to think, oh, just one more run after losing to the 56th minigame is bound to be addicting. But the main side mode that I'm excited to share with you, and something that I think would be a major selling point for this game, is Mario Party Maker. I'm not really the type of guy to suggest this sort of thing, because I think that the Mario Maker concept is oftentimes hard to pull off when it comes to other series or even spin-offs. But while making my own boards for this video, I stumbled across this website called Party Planner 64. It's very simple, yet complex all at the same time. You're given a handful of different spaces and ways to connect them, and then you can just make your own board layout however you see fit. And that's basically what I'm suggesting here. While Mario Party Maker sounds complicated in theory, all you really have to do is offer the 10 different board themes already in the game, and then allow players to pick out their own spaces and layouts to place them on the map. Obviously, things like happening spaces would have to be toned down with only a handful of selectable effects, but I could honestly see this becoming a reality one day. I'd also allow players to upload their own boards and download other people's to give this Mario Party game the long life it deserves. This is also just my cop-out in case you all absolutely hate my board ideas, okay? Make it yourself. But in all seriousness, thank you all so much for watching. This was a massive project to work on, and I'm really proud of how it all came out. If you like this style of content, I've made 2 other videos in the Let's Make a Game series, one on Super Smash Bros. And one on Animal Crossing, so if you haven't seen those yet, be sure to check them out. I'm sure you'll enjoy them. They're much shorter than this one. So yeah, I also want to give a shout out to all of my patrons who make these videos possible, as well as all of you for being patient in the long time it took for me to make this video. And as always, please remember, believe to achieve.